If you shoot full frame Sony and you enjoy taking portraits, this is one that you should definitely consider. There are a handful of 135mm options out there. Perhaps the most popular is the Sony 135 f1.8, which currently on Amazon is $2,100. Samyang has one that is about $760. Sigma also has an Art Series version that is $1,000, and now there is an option from Viltrox. This is the brand new 135mm F1.8 Lab, a full-frame autofocusing beast of a lens with a screen on top of it and built-in Bluetooth. And in this video, we are going to be checking it out. This lens comes in a large black box. Inside is some foam, a box with a carrying pouch, an info and warranty card, and the lens itself. It comes with a deep rubber-lipped lens hood and plastic front and rear lens caps. This is an absolute chunk of steel. The build is a mixture of plastic, glass, and metal, and it comes in at a staggering 1,234 grams, which is a few ounces shy of 3 pounds. It's a large lens as well, even compared to something like the Tamron 28-75 G2. The width of this 135 is something else. You'd think that this is an f1.4 or f1.2 based on the weight, but it isn't. Starting at the rear, there is a metal mount, electronics, a USB-C port for firmware updates, and a Sony orange rubber gasket around the mount. According to Viltrox, this lens is dust and splash resistant. The back end part of this lens is some sort of metal alloy, and it transitions into a plastic right at this screen. Now the screen shows you a number of things: distance to subject, your aperture value, and some functions. There is a click on and off switch for the aperture, as well as a 3-option focus limiter switch. The aperture ring is metal and it turns smoothly with satisfying clicks that can be turned off. In front of it, there are 2 programmable buttons, a lab logo, and an autofocus manual focus switch. The manual focus ring is rubberized and grippy, all electronic, and unfortunately not linear. AF 135 1.8 FE on the top and 82mm filter thread, minimum focus of 2.36 feet, and image size is printed at the bottom. The front lens element is a massive piece of glass with a fluorine coating. Inside there are 14 elements in 9 groups, an 11-bladed diaphragm, and a Hyper VCM autofocus motor. But all this stuff really doesn't matter much if this lens does not perform. So here's how it does on my A7C. All of these are unedited JPEGs straight out of the camera. Ready, set, go. Alright, so the images coming out of this lens are exceptionally good. There are a couple of small issues, but in general, for those of you who aren't picky, this is a very solid performing lens. Sharpness is incredibly good across the frame. There's no vignetting or barrel distortion to worry about if you have in-camera corrections turned on. The colors are punchy, vibrant, full of contrast. The bokeh is smooth, and with such a shallow depth of field, you can photograph your subject in front of a dumpster and it will still look good. Chromatic aberrations are suppressed and shockingly not really an issue even wide open. There's a tiny bit of bokeh, but not much at all compared to most lenses. Some G Master lenses have worse chromatic aberration performance than this one. Autofocus performance is also excellent. The motor is near silent, it's fast and accurate. I had my son walk towards me as I snapped a few photos, and it got about an 80% hit rate, which is solid for a third-party lens. So you might be thinking, okay, but what's wrong with it? Well, there are just a few small little complaints that I will list out. First, I'm not sold on the aperture ring and the screen combo. I understand the idea behind it, but in practice, it is harder to see where your aperture is, and I found myself constantly checking where that value was, and because it's indicated and printed in such small text, it was a bit hard to see. Add to that, the clicks in the aperture are kind of varied and uneven. in, and even landing on a value something like f2.8 seems and even looks uncertain. Things just don't line up as they should. I'd rather have traditional markings at the end of the day with hard stops at either extreme to let me know that, hey, I'm shooting wide open at f1.8 even without looking at the lens, because I could just rotate it all the way to that extreme. Second, the buttons, they are a bit clicky, kind of small, and a little cheap feeling. Not really the most confidence inspiring, especially since you have to hold them down for something like autofocus hold. And so I found them just a few steps behind Sony and Sigma buttons. Third, flaring performance is about average with this lens. There is some teal and purple in the flares, but contrast remains pretty strong. Number 4, the bokeh, it's good. Most of the time it's really good, but in some situations it does look a little busier than it should. This is an ultra telephoto, so it does compress everything in the scene, but yet somehow it can get a little distracting at times. Also, the bokeh balls themselves seem to be a little bit darker around the edges instead of the more desirable softer roll-off, and so what you get is a little bit of what almost looks like a soap bubble effect at times. It's a cool effect, but again, it can be distracting to some. Lastly, the size and the weight is significant. This isn't some lens that you can just throw in because you will know that it's there and it will put some strain on your shoulders. It is a tank, and from my research, it seems to be bigger and heavier than all of the other competitors. If you can get over these few points, this is quite a performer. In terms of sharpness and subject separation, there's really nothing more that you can ask for. And this lens is launching today for a price of $899 US, but there is a 15% off sale going now until the 10th, so you can save almost $135, making this lens around $764. And it's hard to argue with that number, especially considering it has weather sealing, has USB-C firmware updates, has Bluetooth built in, a screen on it. I mean, there's a lot to like, and ultimately it's 1/3 of the price of that Sony, so I'll link this lens down in the description and in the comments. Let me know what you guys think about this new Viltrox down in that comment section. Is 135mm a better portrait length than 85mm? Leave those theories down below. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for more. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.